Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar presentation titled How Are Organizations Shifting Left in the SDLC to Truly Become DevSecOps Ready? Brought to you by CodeDX. I would like to introduce you to our presenter today, Utsav Sanghani. Utsav is Director of Product Management at CodeDX. Prior to joining CodeDX, Utsav was a Senior Manager of Product Management with Synopsys, where he managed a team of product managers to support strategic software security products. Prior to that, he was at Black Duck Software leading their SCA integration product portfolios. Utsav holds a master's in engineering from Dartmouth College and a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Mumbai. This time, I'd like to pass it off to Utsav for the presentation.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about how organizations are shifting left in their SDLC to truly become DevSecOps ready. But before we really begin, let's explore the agenda for today. So I'm going to start off by talking about the origins of shift left and DevOps, move into understanding what were the theoretical motivations that for which data we now have around embracing DevOps and what organizations worldwide have done. Why is it so difficult to shift security around this? And we'll try to get into the second level of detail surrounding the challenges and the reason for security sort of not being compatible with standard DevOps practices, understand best ways to keep this under control, and then summarize it with a report card that really talks about the best way to manage this for us. So with that, I'll quickly, start off on the origins of shift left and how it was the genesis of what is today DevOps. So as a lot of you know, shift left, the methodology and the understanding was to move a lot of the non-development related, areas like QA, like testing, like security, closer to development without actually incorporating additional human resources or machine resources, and essentially focus on getting more velocity out the door. And the thinking was the savings and the optimization this provided was oftentimes was postulated to be a magnitude much higher than just a sort of a minor change in processing. This technical move towards agile development and shift left testing, combined with the introduction of lean management techniques and a culture that supported and endorsed shared responsibility across the SDLC for different roles and different sort of members, part of the product team, really built what is foundational to a DevOps culture today. Now, this was something that was theoretically a postulation, but over the course of the past decade or so, we now have organizations who've embraced this ideology and have come back with data points that were initially only theoretical motivations. So let's look at the first data point here. Operational savings. So Larry Smith, as some of you know, is a software guru, and he had postulated way back in 2001 where bugs are cheaper when caught young. Steve McConnell, another expert in this space, had a similar assessment. And so what we now have data for is a study done by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Ponemon Institute that has tried to put a dollar amount to each of these different stages in the SDLC and the approximate cost of fixing it. And as you can see, an issue that's fixed way later in the production post-release process is more than 100 times more expensive than the cost you would incur at fixing the issue during the requirements and sort of coding stage. So this is the significant motivation for organizations around operational savings and trying to make sure that they can keep the costs under control. Similar motivation is performance and code quality. So the earlier you fix these problems, the code overall application performs better. There's less rework needed, and that translates into more monetary savings for the organization. And because the overall quality of the code has improved, it also reduces the possibility of downtime and the financial implications this has for organizations. And so you're seeing a lot of savings all around, depending on what type of organization you are. If you're a big ISV with hundreds and thousands of developers, or if you're a specialized organization focusing in the financial services, healthcare, retail, or if you're just a mid-market B2B enterprise organization or a startup, you're seeing savings across the board. And we now have data courtesy of a variety of reports. This data was sourced from the State of DevOps report, and you can see there's incentive to push for DevOps, keeping the performance and quality savings in mind. The next most obvious one is velocity and throughput. And so referencing this very same data point, we see that 82% of developers are now coded as being happy and satisfied, and they feel they're releasing code more quickly. 75% QA teams are feeling they're working more collaboratively with development in finding issues and fixing them, and really helps improve their overall agility as well. And then similar stat for operations teams, where they're fixing issues more collaboratively with development, helping them spin up their applications in specific cloud environments, in specific deployment scenarios as needed. So you're seeing a lot of satisfaction across the three major stakeholders within your SDLC: dev, QA, and obviously the operations folks. Combining this with lean management that we talked about in the first slide, lean management really was focusing on understanding how you can get rid of the bureaucracy that goes around decision-making as part of software development. And what lean management principles were advocating for is you need to really understand your SDLC. There is no one recipe that works for all organizations. It's very customized depending on the line of business, depending on your processes, the way geographically your teams are set up, how your teams are set up, the development process. Is it waterfall? Is it true agile? Is it a mix of both? So you really need to understand the SDLC, the tools, and the processes, and essentially boost and sponsor a culture for shared responsibility. So all the functions within an SDLC are equally shared across developers, QA team members, operations team members, your build release engineers, broader DevOps teams, security, etc. It also talks about prioritizing automation, so it makes it easier to automate some of these time and resource intensive processes and really focus human capital, human resources more around the specific needs that really need the attention of a developer or an individual to go in and prioritize. But all the other sort of redundant items can be automated, and that can essentially help open up opportunities and reduce overhead for these teams. And lastly, from a security standpoint, you need to be able to have good understanding of the different stages in your SDLC and therefore put in place security controls. You can't have the same security controls further left as you would have maybe say during production, just because it's a different way of managing this. Now, the last motivation around productivity and satisfaction. This is where we've broken down the table into two sets of personas. We have the user personas on the left, and we have the buyer personas on the right. The user personas are basically dev, QA, and operations, and the buyer personas is the security team in purple, and we have the executive or the business leaders below that. From this very report, we saw some really good data points where 34% development team members, so developers, security developers, engineers, they were really happy and satisfied with this move to DevOps. Same data point for the QA and operations team. However, what really puzzled us was security and business. These are two big decision makers in the organization. They were not really satisfied with this move, which made us think there is some inherent problem in trying to shift security left into the SDLC. So we take a deeper look into that and try and understand what could be the inherent reasons really stopping security and business leaders from getting the benefits of DevOps that were initially postulated. So we try to take try to understand the root cause behind this. And one interesting stat really caught my eye. And the question that was asked to participants in this very survey from the mapping the DevSecOps process was, how many changes were made, or what changes specifically were made in your software development process? And we see an alarming number of only 2.8% respondents saying they were making changes to support a shift left security workflow. And that's a really alarming number, because if security is not moving left, it continues to remain in the silo that it has existed all this while as an afterthought. Just makes me wonder that security teams are now feeling like our friend from The Hobbit, Mr. Baggins, where he's, and I quote, "I feel thin, sort of stretched like butter scraped over too much bread." They're spread too thin. It's impossible for them to manage their security processes in line with development and operate at the speed of DevOps. So there has to be some inherent challenges that security is seeing from developers and DevOps team members that is restricting security from moving left into the SDLC. Another data point that we stumbled upon is the survey by PagerDuty, where they found that 57% of DevOps teams, so this includes your developers, your build engineers, your QA, all of the individuals working across different facets of the SDLC, pushing back on security best practices. And that is, again, a pretty high number for trying to sort of understand why security best practices cannot be implemented, which is why we try and sort of get to the root cause here by looking at the participants themselves, starting with the developer. So the one observation we make is the developer is subjected to a lot of tool chaos. There's an explosion of tools, starting with IDEs and source code management systems. This is their bread and butter. They use this to author code, make changes, push changes. They're forced by security to use source code scanners to manage all the proprietary code within their environment. They have specialized tools to manage the legal and security risks coming from open source tools, open source libraries. There are other tools in place to help support scanning of APIs or scanning specific components of software, which are very, very specific to, and they're specialized in handling that. And then you have ad hoc development, tooling, needed for building your environment or making sure you have the necessary prerequisites to be able to author a specific capability within the application. And then being able to push changes into CI/CD tooling, and working with issue trackers. And then if you're deploying into a more cloud and container specific environment, you need to be able to support being able to push changes into that specific container and cloud environment. And so there's this explosion of tools across the board for a developer. Similarly, the DevOps individual is experiencing a similar tool chaos. A lot of the tools are shared across the board, but we also do see some separate tools that the DevOps team members have to focus on. They now have to look at multiple SCMs. Like there's been so many times we've seen organizations use multiple SCM systems across teams. And so DevOps members need to be able to manage that. And then cloud deployment is another specialized area where they help developers be able to spin up and run the applications in an environment, using Terraform templates in AWS or Azure, GCP, whatever may be the standardized way you deploy software today. So there's tool explosion and tool chaos. But what really makes this a bigger problem is the nature of these tools. All of these tools are disparate, disjoint, completely not intercompatible with each other, to the extent that it's impossible to get a coherent set of data points that we can use as part of code authoring or as part of reviewing for security policies. And that disjoint tool nature is really the root cause for some of this frustration. Based on some research that we did at CodeDX, we see an average number an average developer using 7 tools in an SDLC. We see on an average 8 tools being used by DevOps team members, and then 9 tools used by security teams, depending on the level of specialization, level of coverage they have available, to help us reach a grand total of 24 tools that an average development team is using today. And what makes this all the more unmanageable is the fact that all these tools are not intercompatible. So what do we do? How do we help solve this problem? Tools are going to exist. No, you're never going to be in a situation where one vendor is able to offer everything across code authoring, code quality, security. So how do we fix this problem and focus on the problem of helping security shift left in the SDLC? So we did an assessment specifically to help security teams and business leaders be more successful and be more satisfied with their DevOps processes and truly reach that point of DevSecOps. So starting with the security team, the first concern they have is even if they do instrument and put in place tools, the attack surfaces are constantly evolving. You're seeing developers choosing a variety of new capabilities to help build more efficient software, more innovative software, and that poses a big risk for security. It can be microservices, new set of APIs, container security, cloud, serverless, low code. There's a variety of technologies in place right now. The second concern, the second reason for the failure of security, further left in the SDLC is lack of clarity. Shared responsibility is great, but there's oftentimes nobody available to take charge and make a decision. Everybody therefore is confused and there's no single point of contact. The third reason is high startup cost. Specifically from the context of security, a lot of these security tools are not dev or DevOps friendly. And in trying to make them ready for your SDLC, you have to incur a lot of high startup costs that becomes impossible to really build it and deploy it successfully in the SDLC. Shunning developers and DevOps teams away from it and rendering security to be an afterthought in the SDLC process. And then lastly, lack of automation. You saw how developers and DevOps team members are already getting bombarded with tools from different facets of their responsibilities. And with lack of automation, they're not going to be okay with signing up for more responsibilities, working through multiple security tools, and be able to handle the requirements, particularly from a reviewing standpoint, triaging standpoint, and prioritization standpoint. Security today works in collaboration with development, and just because all of these tools really don't have the underlying automation to support that collaboration, they really don't get any dev support, and security is sort of left working on this in silos. Now, looking at the business leadership and trying to understand what their struggles are, the first problem is no risk methodology. Business leaders are trying to equate how security risk coming in from software, particularly applications, how does that match up to their business priorities, and what do they need to do around it? And so because there's a missing org-wide methodology around risk management, they're never able to get an accurate assessment of the risk posture. The second problem is this trade-off. How do I know what trade-off I can make given the risk with a particular application and the reward for the organization? Is this a critical, mission critical tier 1 application that is revenue generating for the organization? And if so, what is the risk around it? Am I okay with that? Am I okay to sort of accept the risk that's available there? Because it's never going to be a point where an organization has zero risk. It's basically understanding the right tolerance levels and making the right decisions. So the lack of that from a security, application security standpoint, and tying that to the business context is another reason plaguing business leadership today. The third one is lack of visibility. Today, it's impossible for business leadership to seriously understand the real-time sort of progress of applications getting built. How are they getting built? What's the risk profile at different stages as it progresses from left at the developer side all the way to the right, getting ready for production and deployment. So this missing single pane of glass view and lack of real-time analytics is a big problem. And then lastly, automatic security compliance. Business leaders are tasked with working with the CISO organization at the management level to make sure that they're in compliance with specific security standards. If you're in the medical devices space, if you're in the healthcare space, HIPAA is a compliance standard you use. Financial services often have to comply with the PCI standards. A lot of government organizations, government contractors, federal agencies have STIGs or DISA-STIG requirements. So how can a solution be made available to business leaders that can take in the context of all of this software risk and put them in a way that they can submit to these security agencies and stay compliant with their requirements? So these are the 8 reasons why security is not successfully shifting left, and security and business leaders are not satisfied with the move to DevOps. So what is happening because of this? Because security is not shifting left, you're seeing really, really bad impact from a security management standpoint today. And this is as recent as December of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So we're seeing 42% of respondents in the survey around mapping the DevSecOps landscape talk about how it's too late in the process. Security is still happening as an afterthought, way further right in the SDLC than really required. 36% find it really difficult to understand, review, and triage the discovered vulnerabilities. 31% have a really hard understanding in how they should be able to prioritize something. They don't have the business context. They don't really have the full understanding. Severity is not just the only attribute that's required for prioritization. It all revolves around your development process, the risk you're okay with accepting, what are the other areas of risk that you may have. Is there a security compliance requirement that you need to align with? So how do we factor in all of those attributes and really work towards a better way to prioritize those findings? And then lastly, close to one third of the respondents had a hard time identifying the right person that a particular issue needs to go to. And because owners could not be identified, those issues are still languishing in the backlog with no fix available. So these are really compelling, eye-opening numbers that really need to be addressed. And so this is a nice segue into my next topic. How can we control this? There has to be some solution available that can make this problem go away through its out-of-the-box capabilities. And this is where I want to introduce you to CodeDX. CodeDX is a unified software risk management solution that takes in all of the data from a variety of these security solutions. And these are all disparate, disjoint, completely not compatible with each other, and make those available into the CodeDX context in such a way that these are all correlated, aggregated, normalized, deduplicated, and prioritized based on the requirements you have and your application's risk profile. It helps track and manage the remediation. So which ones need to be tracked, which ones need to be fixed, and how they need to be fixed. It also helps centralize the risk analytics part of it. So management teams, business leaders are made aware of how risk is flowing through their SDLC, how risk is getting introduced, what are the potential causes for that. And then lastly, automating the whole triage prioritization process, and doing this as you move across different personas in the SDLC. So here CodeDX is working with developers, with QA, with management, ops, and security teams at different levels in the SDLC, making the same coherent prioritized list of findings available through native IDEs and SCM integrations for the developer and the QA team members, helping ops understand the implications of where a particular application needs to be run. So pulling in network security and infrastructure security results, as well as cloud and container security, helping security teams manage this through a web server, or if they want to use this in a headless fashion, they can do so using our public APIs, and then providing dashboards which are extensible and easy to comprehend for management teams, and also giving them the reports they need from a compliance standpoint. So CodeDX is that one-stop shop for collaboration across different personas within the SDLC. And then starting May of 2021, we will also be adding in Secure Code Warrior integration natively within CodeDX. This will allow security teams to be able to review the findings that come in, make sure they have the right training courses, which are contextual, just in time. And so when they pass it on to development to fix the underlying problem, development is also made aware of what the issue is, and they can understand that before they introduce a fix. And over time, really build that organic interest and be cognizant about the security issues, so it reduces the possibility of influx of similar type of problems in the future. And so this is available starting May of 2021. And so in summary and next steps, CodeDX can really help security teams achieve what is called as DevSecOps nirvana. And so here again, if we look at the report card from involving the 8 reasons why security is unable to successfully shift left today, all of these considerations can be very easily satisfied by CodeDX. Starting with evolving attack surfaces, we have 90+ integrations with commercial tools across a variety of security detection techniques to help make sure that your attack surface, as it gets evolved, we're there to keep abreast and make sure we have coverage for that. Lack of clarity. This is somewhere CodeDX offers complete visibility end to end and lets you know from an owner standpoint who's introduced the problem, who's actually responsible for this, and how it can be traced back to them if a fix is needed. It really reduces the overhead by sort of putting it on, on itself to manage all the complexity and make sure that all the data that's coming in is normalized to a standard taxonomy and ready for you to plug and play as part of your DevOps ecosystem. And then lastly, leveraging innovative technologies like machine learning to help support automation across your SDLC processes and reducing, manual overhead that exists in your process today. For business leaders, it offers a customizable risk profile methodology that allows you to, define this globally and have that be translated and implemented at different levels as code moves from development to deployment. It gives you risk-based prioritization capability, so you now have a matrix available to, understand what type of risk is available with what, if you with a particular application, and if you do move ahead with that, what type of business context or the sort of the business priorities is that going to either help achieve or not achieve. So you can actually make that, you can actually, weigh in your options and make the most, most favorable choice for your organization. With real-time analytics and end-to-end visibility, we make sure that there's complete, complete visibility and tracking across the board. And then built-in reports and dashboards ensure that we have automatic security compliance details available out of the box as well. And if you're interested, you can actually sign up for the DZone Insider, mailing list. This is where you can get a lot of information around AppSec thought leadership, best practices, and really how mature organizations are using solutions like CodeDX to successfully shift security into their SDLC process. And if you want to get a demo, we're more than happy to spend some time and give you a demo of the product. With that, I'll turn it back over to our host today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Utsav, for that phenomenal presentation. And I do have a few questions for you with some time remaining. The first of those being, so you talked about DevSecOps nirvana. Have most companies that you've spoken with bought into this concept of DevSecOps, or is there still some hesitancy?
So DevOps as a concept started, and really security was a really good logical component that could be moved into your DevOps process. So organizations acknowledge it, organizations want to do it. They really don't have a good sense of how they can do that. And they oftentimes will start, building something on their own and then abandoning it just because it's not available. And so today, the fundamental problem is organizations are still at that stage where people who started moving in this direction have realized it and have started embracing solutions like CodeDX. For the broader part of the audience, a lot of the organizations are still making sure that they run smoothly as part of their core fundamental DevOps process, and security still remains a sort of a secondary function. Once they do reach security, they'll realize that it's really difficult and it's not as easy as just integrating a testing component into the DevOps process. And so for that reason, that's been the fundamental sort of challenge, that the market hasn't really reached that critical point. But a lot of our customers and a lot of organizations we talk to, they've already gone through that process, learned it the hard way that, hey, this is not possible. And then they've gone for specialized solutions like CodeDX to really help them move left in the SDLC.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So kind of going off of that, do all of these companies have similar challenges in achieving that nirvana?
That's a great question. So when we put this list together, and we also try to see other thought leaders in the space, so Google's done some work around this. The 8 reasons across security and business are pretty much overlapping with a lot of other studies out there as well. So these are recognized problems that a lot of organizations are resonating with. Some of them may not apply to all organizations. For example, you might not have a security compliance requirement, totally possible. But so if that may be an optional one, but for the most part, I would say there's almost an 80 to 90% of what you saw in that assessment list be applicable to your organization.
Oh, wow. Okay, good to know. Okay, another question that I had for you is, how important is automation to the DevSecOps process as a whole?
Automation, I think, is key. It's one of the foundational tenets of how, why DevOps was really, DevOps as a culture, as a best practice, as I would say a thinking ideology was really brought in. And because it pushed for automation in all of the redundant sort of manual intensive processes, which you can automate easily, open up those cycles and really help spend those cycles in focusing on innovation and building something that really is can be translated into better savings or improvements for the organization in general. So I think that automation is a key here. Automation in the context of security has been a challenge for all the reasons that I cited. And one thing that we at CodeDX really try to do is make sure that we understand those challenges. And these are challenges that keep evolving. Today, this is the list of 8 reasons why customers are not, or organizations are not really able to shift left. And so because of CodeDX, they're now able to get that coherent, automated stream of issues that are prioritized, and they don't really have to worry about the overhead coming in from their 24, 26 average tools across the SDLC. They have CodeDX that is managing that problem for them, and with a common taxonomy makes it possible for their DevOps and security teams to collaborate more tightly and work on security issues at the speed of DevOps. So I would say automation is key. Doing that in the context of security has been a challenge, and this is where CodeDX really has a solution available out of the box.
Okay. I mean, despite those challenges that you mentioned, it does feel like CodeDX has taken a lot of steps to make this automation process easier. And as you mentioned, kind of getting rid of those many tools that they use during this SDLC process.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just simple automation. Actually, for to give you an example, you have multiple security techniques, and everybody treats the issues separately. A static analysis result is a finding versus a more deterministic approach like SCA. That's actually a vulnerability. And so if you had to normalize the two and really get them correlated, you really need to have a common taxonomy available to be able to do that. And so organizations typically hit an impasse at that stage where aggregating the findings is great, but once they have to normalize, correlate, and really get into that additional level of coherence that the data needs, that's where they struggle. And that is a specialized function that CodeDX handles for you out of the box. And so for that very reason, I say it's not just pure automation, but there's a lot of data analytics being put in and data science technologies implemented to really make sure you get that coherent list of prioritized findings without the noise in the system.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful to kind of have all that behind the scenes work done for you, all that normalization and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I have one final question for you before we wrap up. And that question is, do a lot of large enterprises attempt to build their own solutions in-house? If so, what are the pros and cons to that?
I think that's a good question. I think that segues nicely from the response I just gave to the second question, because organizations typically will think automation is the only underlying requirement that is driving DevOps, security adoption as part of the DevOps process. It's one of the considerations. It's not the only consideration. And given that security tools are so specialized in a good way, looking just at specific areas of facets of your code. So if you look at static analysis, it's only looking at proprietary code. You look at SCA scanners, it's only looking at your open source libraries. Then you have specialized scanners for container scanning, for cloud native infrastructures, your cloud configuration scanners, etc. And so because these are specialized scanners and you want the best of breed solution, you're really left with the problem of how do you manage this? And so oftentimes we see organizations starting down that path until they hear about CodeDX and they go, wow, my resources can be better spent doing the other more important organization like business critical things rather than having them spend time aggregating this and realizing that they're going to hit an impasse very soon because it's not able to do the specialized work that vendors like ourselves at CodeDX really do around managing that coherent feed of data coming out. So I think it's that part that a lot of organizations have not really learned, and some are learning it the hard way and then coming to us and realizing, oh my God, this is available. I didn't really know, and they're very easy to embrace it. In fact, a lot of organizations that have recently signed on for CodeDX actually were driven because partially because of the automation problem they face, but also the fact that evolving attack surfaces made it impossible for them to really keep tabs on development and really understand, okay, how is the landscape changing? What do I need to do from a security standpoint? And so that's where they use CodeDX, the availability of security integrations, and really use that as a way to build a comprehensive security program that offers close to 100% coverage for their code and under management.
Yeah, that must be nice to kind of be able to take their resources and put that into other things and have CodeDX be that system that they were trying to make anyways. And it sounds like that is incredible. So I have learned a lot today. So thank you so much, Utsav, for walking us through this presentation. DZone was very grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
And DZone would also like to thank CodeDX for providing us with this great webinar. We hope that all of you learned something new that helps you in your developer career. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye now.